Jacksonville. The child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. Poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, The Week That Was, our weekly summary of what has happened in the world of politics, and many times we talk about what's in the environment, and beyond that, it could be also in the world of software development, security. All these things blend in, not just one particular thing, but this time around we'll deal with security. Incidentally, the Cooperstown induction is today. We'll have a report on Cooperstown on Friday Jobber. We talked about some of the inductees. Harold Bain, of course, was one of the surprise ones. A gentleman that had labored fearlessly in his major league career. And this is one of the largest classes. I believe it was 6 that were inducted this year into the hall there in Cooperstown. We always look at that with a certain amount of vigor and seeing what is going on. We look today at Charlie Cook and Karl Rove, and sort of in between there, we'll take a look at, let me just check here, at the suburban component here, and we have Amy Walter. Incidentally, on public radio, there's an Amy Walter podcast, which many times mimic what we have here. In international affairs, a flagged ship under the UK was detained by the Iranian government in the straits, around the Straits of Hormuz. And what is interesting about this, all governments know that that is a very dangerous area to be in, and many governments have advised their ships to be out. Now, was this a deliberate setup? We don't know. 2 ships were actually seized. 1 ship was actually allowed to move on. Now, the sailors on the ship that was seized were from India. That's not unusual. You can have one country with a flag. Liberia is usually a country that flag flies on more ships than any other ships in the world, quite literally. So it is a flag of convenience in the shipping business. Because of that, Brent crude went up some $1.30 and change, and West Texas Intermediate, I believe, about 30-something cents as of the report we had this morning. We'll follow that and have more on the Monday morning quarterback from WBRM Radio. This is incidentally Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth here, and try to get a little handle on the politic on Friday job where we went into the polling that was available. Polling is a little bit different in that the race, some of the polls had the race getting a bit tighter between the many Democrats. Now, those Democrats are traveling around Iowa this week, ERP forums all over the state of Iowa. The NAACP is having its annual convention in the Motor City, Detroit, Michigan, and many of those same actors will be there in a forum at the NAACP. Biden, Beto O'Rourke will be there, Senator Booker from New Jersey, Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, Bernie, Elizabeth Warren. They will all be there, and some of the lesser known ones will be also on the stage, and they'll be questioned by the NAACP types. I believe the convention attracted this year about 10,000 people, which is quite a few people for the NAACP. As many recall, the NAACP went through various stages, some almost dormant stages. I'll get it out in a minute here, where the organization was no more than a corporate shell. And then, of course, under the great Ben Chavis, the organization became an very active organization. People came and people went as far as leadership there, and then the board changed again. There was a period there, Judge, I can't remember his name, out of Memphis, Tennessee, was the chair of the board. That was before Ben Chavis' time. And then we had the trial lawyer out of New Jersey, and was also a minister. He was there, did a very good job, and why he was ousted, never quite figured that one out. He was a man that had won the largest civil settlement in the history of that type of litigation in Georgia. An excellent lawyer there. He also led a march during the Ferguson period across the state of Missouri. So those were some of his accomplishments, where he got the organization into more of an active stage. Now the gentleman that is there now, Johnson, I can't think of his first name, he is more of a corporate type, but because of the times in which we live, confronting the administration and the America First policy, Make America Great Again, etc., the NAACP is forced to act as an organization that defends the civil rights of African Americans and other people, period. As with all the other civil rights organizations that are out there litigating, propagandizing, and organizing continuously, and you will see more of that going into the 2020 elections, and we'll have at least a summary or perhaps a special report on the NAACP forum. We'll go now to Charlie Cook, one of the best handicappers, in the U.S. He has the Cook Report, and he appears periodically on forums. You can catch him on C-SPAN, and you can find him at Charlie Cook DC, I guess is his email address. Anyway, I'll read part of this, and then we'll provide some analysis. A good friend of mine who's an American foreign policy expert recently returned from a trip to Asia, where he met a wide variety of current and former senior government officials from across the region. The consensus view amongst these leaders was that DJ Trump will win a re-election, that polls are unrealistic, that Trump's nativism is more popular than American elites appreciate. He said they see Trump as part of a global trend towards populism and anti-immigration, a united field theory of anti-elite politics that favor dictators and strong men. He continued in an email saying that most are withholding judgment on whether this is a permanent trend in U.S. policy or just the unique effects of Trump's disruption. We, of course, have disruptions in the information technology sector around. With their basic cases and incumbents win, and Trump, surprised once in a strong economy, is likely to favor him again. They are not alone. The expectation of Trump re-election is a reflection of a CNN national poll in May showing 54% of the American people expect him to win. 41% thought that he would not, as well as a Cornerstone macro poll of institutional investors in May. I had not heard of this one. 57% agreed. This is all despite a large and growing body of evidence to the contrary. Jimmy Carter is the only elected incumbent in a post-after World War II era with Gallup's approval rating lower than Trump's are today. Indeed, the president's approval rating has been below Carter for vast majority of his 2+ years in office. A new NBC Wall Street Journal poll conducted the 7th through the 9th of July amongst 800 registered voters showed that Trump with an overall approval rating of 45%, and that was charitable, 32% strongly approved, 13% somewhat approved, and 52% disapproved, 10% somewhat disapproved, 42% strongly disapproved, a ratio of 1.3 strong disapproval for every strong approval. This overall approval rating was identical to that in June 9th through 12th Fox News poll. The disapproval was a point less, including a 1.4 strong disapproval for every strong approval. The June 28th through July 1st ABC poll was similar, as 47% of registered voters approved, 50% disapproved, a little better there. The ABC Wall Street Journal poll showed former VP Joe Biden leading Trump by 9, 51-41, outside of the margin of error. Bernie Sanders ahead by 7 points, and Liz Warren by 5. Senator Harris of California up by 1. The Fox poll had Biden by 10, Sanders up by 9, Warren by 2, and Harris by 1. While Warren and Harris may or may not be the weaker rivals for Trump than Biden or Sanders, they both are much less known, although that might be expected to run a bit behind a well-known Democrat. Amongst registered voters, the ABC poll had Biden leading Trump by 10, Sanders by 1, Harris by 2, and Liz Warren and Buttigieg were even. When some of these foreign leaders might miss their assessment of the 2020 election is the 2016 peculiarity of the role of Hillary Clinton's polarizing profile played, the level of ambivalence that Democratic voters had once appeared that the election was effectively over after the Bush Access Hollywood tape. We did not affirm that opinion. Since 2016's election, the level of intensity amongst Democrats has been off the charts. Witness the ABC Washington Post finding that 52% of Trump's supporters felt it was extremely important that he win a new term, with 73% of current Democratic supporters taking the same position. This is not at all suggest Trump cannot be reelected. Indeed, I think numerous scenarios in which he might win. If the 2020 election is effectively a referendum on democratic socialism rather than on Trump, that would be a start. In a Wall Street Journal column, Peggy Nguyen, one of my favorite conservatives, I hadn't heard her in a while. She hasn't been on Face the Nation, called Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez one of the Women Committee to re-elect the president, an allusion to the official name of the Nixon Committee. Maureen Dowell, equally barbared column in Sunday's Times, quoted Ron Emanuel saying that Cortez's squad hasn't decided if their goal is to unseat Trump or purify the party. Ralph Emanuel is a fool. AOC and her Plominians and accolades deciding that burning down the house is more important than disposing of Trump. That's what Dow said, Maureen Dow. They will be left with a racist, backward president and emotionally satisfaction of their own party. My friend explained in an email that his impression from talking with Asian leaders was that Beijing is seizing the moment to expand, presented them more in sorrow than anger that America's decline has gone from chronic to acute under Trump. He noted that the U.S. is increasingly critical of allies and is monitoring the relationship previously built on shared interests. China does not rely on alliances structures lives in the region and is patient and will outlast fads in American politics. It can be depended upon, and it is not going away. Whether you agree or disagree, it's an interesting perspective to consider. Well, this perspective Mr. Cook talks about is the perspective of many. The Iranians expect Trump to win again, and this is based primarily on what we hear from the corporate media. Now, Charlie Cook is presenting a case here, a very good case from his friend's perspective. Now, the case that he presents as far as where the polls are at the present day, that in itself is very speculative to begin with. One thing to remember, the Trump forces are out there. They are unified around one thing with the Republican Party, and that is to take care of their vested interests, which is the expansion and unification, intensification of present-day capitalist order. That is all it is about. It is about maximizing the amount of profits that they can make through these various regulatory juggernauts that DJ Trump has worked on. Now, this whole immigration thing, this is sleight of hand. Now there's a situation remaining here in a third country. It could be Mexico, it could be Honduras, it could be Guatemala, you name it. And an immigrant has to apply there, and most of those countries really don't have a system. Mexico does, but it's overwhelmed. And basically that is the whole thing. You don't hear much about building the wall anymore, because in the summer months when it's hot, traditionally the number of people decline that are coming into the U.S. There's always this decline in those numbers. And also the protocol for those that are not just crossing the border, you come to a border station and present your papers and ask for political asylum. If you have to do that in a third country, then you are the immigrant that is forced to do that. Now, this is a pilot project, incidentally. It's not at all border crossings, just at some, because of court challenges coming up, and they feel that more than likely the court will not sustain this particular item, because it's up to Congress to write immigration policy, not the president. So thus we have crosshairs already appearing there. And we have an opinion by the Border Patrol Agency, the person that heads that agency, talking about disciplinary action against those people in the secret or hidden is better, and to know it's a secret Facebook page that they made, disparaging comments about immigrants, about Congress types, and various other lewd types of opinions. Some of those people actually still work for the federal government. Some of them had not. They're investigating that. They're even talking about possible criminal charges. Now, where criminal charges could come in is some of these people that are found to be in that group actually acted out some of those statements. For instance, forcing an immigrant to drink from a toilet, various other kinds of abusive activity, and they're in a position to abuse people. There's no doubt about that. And mindset is very, very important in that situation, and it is a trend that many of these law enforcement types have brought to bear. In Chicago, what was it, 4 or 5 police types were fired there as a result of trying to cover up the Quan murder there in the city of Chicago. And you're seeing more and more of that type of situation occurring out in Minnesota. The Noor was transferred to North Dakota, and at the same time Epstein is in the Metropolitan Corrections place there. Judge decide whether he'll make a bond. So you have a lot of little things in that instance. Not if Epstein is an example of these rogue cops, but he is an example of a rogue quasi-politician that even had an office at Harvard, if you can believe that one, that had operated for many, many years, not under the radar. He was out there in public as part of what was going on with the rich and the super rich and the so-called capitalist class. We have a lot of that going on. One thing I would bring up here, there's a long ways between what is going on or what occurs in 2020. We have to get to the actual Iowa caucuses, the primaries, etc. They are a few months away, and then see what the interaction is of there, and what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is doing, and the various other people in the squad, Representative Omar, Representative Lisi out of Detroit, Representative Presley out of the Commonwealth, and where those people are in the scenario of things. Right now they're legislating. Representative Ilhan Omar was in Minnesota conducting a health care reform, something that she should be done. She was warmly welcomed to the city of back to the city of Minneapolis. So nothing has changed there in this environment. Now, this type of environment, polarization, where Trump crowd shouted, "Send her back." Then Trump said he was a little disappointed in the crowd. Then he reverses himself because his political advisors told him to. There's nothing magical about this. No doubt that "Send her back" was orchestrated by some political operatives associated with the Trump campaign, if further investigation comes about. The whole idea of this is to gel together the Trump people and hopefully try to bring some other people out. I was listening to a BBC about the Q. This is some kooky group that's aligned with Trump that keeps talking about the dark state. Those were some of the nuts that came up with a pedophiles operating out of a pizza shop. And Hillary Clinton was behind that. What is happening there? That is what political scientists call a flippable. This whole pedophile operation thing is just a projection. Now, there are people behind pedophiles, but not necessarily the Democratic Party in that activity. Now, would you put Epstein in that? Well, Epstein definitely engaged in younger women, some supposedly below the age of 18, but as far as what evidence we have was not exclusive. But understand, when you get these types of things put out as quote unquote a fact, people believe that, and there are a lot of disguises coming out there. And it was mentioned by this professor I know, this Mary Ann Williamson, a campaign, and her basic New Age type religious perspective. Nothing New Age about it. It's the same old age, and there are various components of those kinds of people out there. And there are some elements that fall into this Q operation, as it's called, by somebody, and my take on that is it's a political consultant out there rallying these nuts. but you have to look at what they are actually doing and their approach to their whole ideological approach. There are two basic tenets in that in the philosophical makeup. You have idealism, which includes New Age, religions, mysticism, quackery, you name it, and materialism, which is just the material world. That science is a science. And these are some problems you have. But to make it look a little bit better for people, some of these characters would try to project themselves as, say, loving everyone, who opposes loving everyone or loving themselves, which is a lie. They're actually engaged in hate. And the same thing as some of those characters will go around saying safety is a primary thing. Well, the police have talked about that. That's a law and order maker there of a safe or be safe. Well, that's no such thing. Even that's got into medical exams. Do you feel safe in your community? And the answer to many people is no. Now, it depends on what they're talking about safety. Are they talking about physical safety? Are they talking about psychological safety? Or are they talking about economic violence, which is much more acute? Are they talking about environmental issues that the community is literally next to a dump or some other kind of chemical runoff? That is all in terms of safety. So that has to be expanded. There was a debate in some doctors' offices of talking to people about where they live, the chemicals that they're exposed to, and this brings in a climate change, something these kooks would deny. They say, well, there's no climate change out there. We have now heat waves, and how do they answer that question? The answer is they don't. And when you are confronting these clowns, you have to remind them of what they're actually doing. And if they come up to you and say, well, they're interested in loving everyone or everyone being safe, you just say this is an absolute lie. You can't be safe denying climate, because in itself it destabilizes the world. Cutting down trees in the Amazon, or opening up the Arctic for drilling. These are all economic violence that make people unsafe. Not only the people that killed Laquan, the person that killed Laquan in Chicago, or that covered it up in Noah in Minnesota. These are the same characters that would ask for leniency for him. So you have to get an idea of who these people are. But they are an important part in the campaign. It's the same thing. The anti-immigrant stance appeals to some of these people. Why? They're not living on the borders. Because they have an intense hate of anyone that they perceive as being different from them. And they have a projection that many of these people also hate themselves. This is not our purpose to be in the psychological business here, but this is part of it. As Mr. Cook says, fads in American politics. Well, it is somewhat of a fad. It is at the same time a phenomenon that you see. I don't say it's a phenomenon. It's been around for many, many years. You have it in Germany, these right-wing parties. But who is promoting the right-wing parties? The capitalist class, because of destabilization of the capitalist system. Example of that is in the UK with Brexit. Brexit and the people that put up the leave situation there have created a situation where the EU economy itself is in great jeopardy. Because the United Kingdom is not what it used to be. It hasn't been that since the Great Patriotic War. Their navy is not the navy of the world, and thus they have to get other people to help them in the Straits of Hormuz. But beyond that, many companies are going to be forced to move out of the UK if they have a so-called hard Brexit. And the reality is out there, and it's not a deep state, it's not the Russia interfering in the election. That is not out there. And they would present the globalists. They used to call people internationalists. But the whole deal is that the way the present economy is set up, it is a global economy. You simply cannot shield your economy from it, period. So if, for instance, you have these tariffs against China, the Chinese has shifted now to a consumer economy. Incidentally, we have a numbers man program. We'll have another one where we talk more about that and the inclusion now of climate models in there. Very good one we have up there. Go to it on places where you find these types of programs, whether it be on iHeart, on Stitcher, Spreaker, the Google internet radio part, or even the old Apple part, YouTube, or wherever you go. We have some links there that you can utilize. Let me just move on here. I spent some time on this, and Mr. Cook's article bringing this out to bear about what is, if you dive deep down behind some of this re-election affirmer. Much more important than what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is doing, and where DJ Trump is on any given day. These things are conceived, and they are delivered to people to bring an impact. This whole tweet thing of send them back, talking down the country, that's been tried before. It'll last for a week. It sort of played out, and then they get on something else. But as I think it was Representative Presley was saying, will not take that bait. And this is one of the things where the people in Asia see this. There's a long time out there, and one of the big components here is how the economy will do. Let's look at Amy Walter's take, and then we'll go to Uncle Carl himself. She's writing again on the Cook Report on the 18th of June. She's talking about suburban districts. In 2018, suburban districts were once the exclusive domain of GOP, showed willingness to support Democrats for Congress from Orange County, that's in California, but that's been trending for a long time, to suburban Houston and Dallas, Texas. Democrats picked up districts that pre-Trump had never been serious Democrats' target. Of the 43 Democrat districts carried, half of 22 were seats in Republican districts. Mitt Romney had carried in 2012. Just 8 pickups came from Obama-Trump districts. The message these voters sent to GOP was clear. They did not like the way DJ Trump operated. It didn't matter that the economy was booming in many of these well-off districts, and they smoked off the apocalyptic warning from Republicans of a socialist takeover of the Congress. We also know that the president is uninterested in winning those voters back. Not one, even the most naive and optimistic Republicans, believe the president will buckle down and spend the next year focused on driving an economic message. Instead, he and many around him continue to believe that his base is big enough to overwhelm any new defections from suburbia. Keep the base angry and engaged on immigration, race, and real Americans, and they will win just like they did in 2016. Many Democrats argue that this is a one-tick pony act that has already failed. In the waning days of 2018 campaign, Trump zeroed in on a caravan of immigrants making their way, now it's no caravan now, from Mexico, hoping to rally conservatives, paint the Democrats as weak-kneed on national security, but most of the Democratic House candidates refused to take the bait, dismissing calls by some on the left to abolish ICE. Well, that was a waste of time. These candidates stayed focused on health care issues that put so many Republicans on the heel. At the same time, some in the party and punditry wanted to see more fully engagement by Democrats on issues. Anyway, here. The problem with igniting the issue that it played into the Republicans' midterm strategy, it made Democrats sound squeamish and insecure on immigration. It made it sound as if Democrats weren't really sure whether they believed that the country should have immigration law. This is a gift to the Republicans. I was worried that Trump would be able to exploit Democrats' lack of cohesion and a unified message. That's something that used to be talked about all the time. The notion was shouldn't be talking about central issues this president has talked about for 3 years is crazy. In retrospect, the hand wringing over refusal to engage Trump on immigration debate looked flat out and was flat out wrong, no doubt about this. But this isn't 2018 anymore. The caravan crisis was theoretical. Today, the flood of refugees on the border is not. In 2018, Democrats didn't need to have their own plan for fixing the border. They weren't in control of the House, which leads to another big difference between now and 2018. Back then, not only did Democrats have the luxury to avoid engaging Trump on the immigration debate, but they were also disciplined enough not to give their GOP opponents any fodder to paint them as extremists. This week I talked to a couple of Democratic strategists, long track record of helping candidates in the battleground districts. One told me that he expected to see the image of candidates raising their hands in support of providing undocumented immigrant health care and insurance in a lot of attack ads next fall. Also included in the reel will be the image of all hands in support of decriminalizing illegal border crossings. Vice President Biden has, of course, walked back his hand. It's not just suburban voters that Democrats should worry about alienating with these policies. The New York Times, Tom Inzel, using the data provided by the AFL-CIO's political director, Podhorzer, argues that there is a small but substantial group of European working class voters that are up for grab, but he writes there are big hurdles to Democrats that captain him on issues of racial discrimination, immigration. These voters side with the Republicans. Working class with Republican European working class voters than Democrats, but on healthcare, economic issues, there's far more overlapping views between them and Democrats. These voters are also disproportionately represented in battleground states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Trump believes that he won in 2016 because not in spite of his rhetoric's divisiveness and open hostility to people of color and immigrants. His instincts have been further rewarded by a GOP that has failed to criticize him, no doubt about that. United there. There's plenty of evidence, like say the 2018 midterms, that voters are ready to turn the page from Trump. But if Trump can make the election a choice instead of a referendum, he has a chance to succeed. No, he can't make it a referendum on the squad, no doubt. Squad is not running in every district. He wants to make it personal, but he can push the debate into the terrain where he's most comfortable. Culture, race, and immigration force Democrats to make unforced errors. Well, a lot of thought is being brought to that. Voters who support Democrats in 18, I wouldn't, and who remain weary of Trump, said one Democratic strategist would prefer to vote against Trump. But this person said they also aren't giving their vote away to just anyone. Furthermore, he said this Democrat, the idea that Democrats have an either or choice in 2020, pick an establishment candidate to win over suburban working class type voters, or pick an outsider to rally younger voters and voters of color, is a false narrative. No doubt about that. There's nothing we can do to win the suburban voters. This Democrat says they will turn young people off. Trump is the best motivator. There's no doubt about that particular position. It's been out there a very, very long time. Let's go to Uncle Carl Robe. He's here somewhere, we hope. Killing last night. Okay. Here's Uncle Carl. We have to have someone to finish off where we were. And he's pushing the same thing. He's writing the Wall Street Journal on the 18th of July. AOC, that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Trump's even now saying that her name is so long he'll just call her Cortez. Oh well. Doesn't think much of the agencies that keep America safe. That is from the New Yorker editor David Risnick. Recently asked about a call to abolish the U.S. immigration custom establishment. Yeah. Couldn't ICE be reformed? No, she replied. The freshman said the core structure of ICE and the entire Department of Homeland Security are large threats to American citizens. There's no doubt about that. Resnick asked, would you get rid of Homeland Security too? She replied, I think so. She called the department formation of one of G.W. Bush's administration an egregious mistake, and described her call for abolishing it as a very qualified and supported position. He added, we never should have created it. There's a lot of people that agree with her on both sides of the political plane. The abolishment of Homeland Security is moronic, stupid, naive, and dumb. Well, should the U.S. really shut down the agency in charge of air security so hijackers armed with box cutters? Nobody is advocating that. Could board planes. Do Americans want our planes to be left unprotected? Well, no, they wouldn't be left unprotected. The duties would just transfer somewhere else. Drug traffickers, terrorists. Would America be safer or more free without the capabilities like a disaster services, terrorist prevention, fusion centers, biological warfare defenses? Some of those things are actually handled not by Homeland Security. They even puts in the Coast Guard. Uncle Carl's going beyond the call of duty here. All of these are Homeland Security functions. But again, the Coast Guard is not under Homeland Security. Ocasio-Cortez, he doesn't even call her a representative here. Some of the same strategy. Trump trying to say her name is just Cortez. Doesn't believe the department is needed to keep America safe. I told Fox News Martha McCullum last week the congresswoman should talk to Democratic Chair of Homeland Security and Intelligence Committee. She should talk to the police departments of the city she represents. The NYPD will tell her the Department of Homeland Security has helped foil plots in the Big Apple, no doubt about that, and so has the NYPD. If AOC remains intent on abolishing the department, I suggest she visit with constituents who lost a loved one in 9/11. He's trying to connect this up with 9/11. The problem with 9/11 was a lack of intelligence. The department creation was a great bipartisan effort. I told McCullum, a new way to meet a 21st century challenge, and overreaction, no doubt. Shortly after the exchange on Fox, Ocasio-Cortez appeared on Twitter to say that 132 representatives voted against creating the department in 2002, calling it ill-conceived. She wrote that discussing a reorganization shouldn't be out of the question. It is really not that radical. And, basically speaking there, that's over 25% in the House. Except she hasn't said she advocated reorganization. She called for the abolishment. Well, there's a difference there. Campaign rhetoric is out there where we abolish something to reorganize it. The votes have to be there to do anything. I responded on Twitter reminding her that more than twice as many representatives, 295, voted to create the department. The Senate vote was 90-9, pointing out her transparent flip-flop, suggesting that upon sober reflection, even she might have decided it was nutty to get rid of the department. If she hadn't really changed her mind, I challenged her to show us her bill to undo it. She called it an egregious mistake. Then we could all see how many co-sponsors her very qualified and supported position drew. Well, part of the problem there is that it would have to go to the Senate, where it would not pass, even if she had 250 people that agreed with it. Crickets and no response. There's nothing she can say that makes her look good. but the incident shows that the draft of the Green New Deal. Now, he has moved on from Homeland Security to the Green New Deal issued in was not an aberration. Well, the aberration is now with the heat wave out there, more and more people are thinking about it. Draft with reference to Cal's unspecified constraints on commercial air travel. People are beginning to warm up to that. Not only that, with teleconferencing, fewer people are actually traveling by air. A collection of left-wing nauseums that transform America into a new Venezuela. No one has talked about that. Her chief of staff told the troop last week the Green New Deal isn't mainly about climate, it's about making America a socialist. Well, that is not the correct view there. It's not about making America a socialist. These are social democratic proposals, and that is just what they are, proposals. You have those in campaigns. You had those in campaigns dating back to FDR. FDR had proposals. He even actually packed the Supreme Court, was overruled. But this is a history in politics. You have many things that are made. That is not the issue. What the Democrats have to work on now, the Green New Deal, is actually in itself something that is being championed by many. And with Moody's Analytics coming out with models looking at 30 years, and you'll start to see 50 years, the Green New Deal will look as just normal policy. And Uncle Carl knows that. That's why, to prop up his little article there, he had to go back to 9/11, talk about Homeland Security, to prop up ICE. Everyone knows, as LBJ would say, if it's been to a goat roping contest, that ICE is a rogue organization, period, and needs to be realmed in, and needs to be totally either reorganized or abolished, probably abolished. And that has happened before to organizations in various cities. They've had so-called gang task force, multi-city or county and state task force that had to be totally disbanded. That is not unusual for disbanding, period. And in its place, those duties used to not be in ICE. They would be redistributed to other agencies under a different structure, transitional structure. And so that would happen. This is nothing new here. It's not a rocket science. People should not look at it as rocket science. And this is where the unfortunate political type of speculation is. But what Uncle Carl is doing is using the same platform that he's been using since Nixon was, not Nixon, but actually since Reagan was in office. Some of the same crowd, and they have not expanded. But what has occurred there that Reagan did not have, he had the Republican Party, but not the whole Republican Party. In 1980, you have to understand that there were three candidates running. There was a man named John Anderson out of Illinois, a so-called moderate Republican that's still alive. And the last time I looked, he was running. And then you had Jimmy Carter and Reagan. And Carter lost the election by the popular vote. Not as many. Electoral vote was a little bit different. But many of those states that Reagan carried, like California, are no longer carryable. And the suburban vote is a little different now than it is. And a lot of that will go on economic issues, where many of those manufacturing workers that in the beginning of the Trump administration received jobs, like for instance at the carrier plant, those jobs are no longer there, and they do add up. 1,000 jobs here, 500 jobs there that were lost. And you will see more of that. You'll see it anyway because of modernization of the economy as more robotics enter the economy, and also demographics. People retire, less workers out there. And the big problem of finding workers that can even do the task, that is becoming more and more. And that will play into this whole immigration situation, because to deal with the lower order of entry-level type workers, manual workers, etc., you eventually have to deal with your more highly skilled workers. And those special little pass, I call them, that's in high-tech themselves basically unfair. And their lotteries, there's a whole slew of things. John McCain tried to solve it, the late John McCain. And they didn't get around to it. They need a comprehensive immigration law, and that is one of the things that Democrats can push. Can't get it through the Senate. That should be in a debate more so than what happens with ICE. It doesn't happen with ICE. And health care, a lot of that would depend on what the courts do. If the courts sustain the Affordable Care Act, if they abolish it, that will open up a new vigorous can of worms, and the candidates will not only be talking about reinstating the Affordable Care Act, but also at the same time the public option. And these things are not as foreign as Uncle Carl would have you believe, and they're all based upon the economics of the day. Medical care is getting more expensive, and it will become even more expensive if you take out existing conditions and many other things covered on the Affordable Care Act, such as allowing students to remain on their parents' policy up to 26 years of age, and dealing with college debt. These are real things that affect real people, and hopefully real people will not be scared off by those. This is Boston Red and Jerry Pippin broadcast booth on the 20th of July, and this was the week that was. We'll see you on the Monday Morning Quarterback on our political channel here, and I will also see you on Numbers Man. That is our macroeconomics channel, and we're working an open source report. We'll get that out sometime early next week. We also have Identity Politics. It has been done. It will appear either on a Sunday or it will appear early next week. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on Monday morning. Good day.